Today I will be going over how I style my Gepard wig, although the methods I use will be able to be used on many different types of wigs. First, you want to make sure you get a good quality base wig. I get mine from Kasou wigs. I find their quality is really good and it's a lot easier to work with. You want to make sure the wig's the right size before you start styling, so adjust the back slip pockets as you can see here as to what fits your head the best. I already know, but you might want to try it on just to see, and please don't make it too tight or it will just cause a wig headache when you're at con, and you don't want that. Now you want to make sure you secure it to a wig head. I do really recommend a cork wig head. I find they're so much easier to style on. And as you can see here, I've got two little pins and I pin them in right on the corner where the temples of your head are. There should be a little flap that's quite easy to pin it in. And make sure they're about equal length and equal size, otherwise you won't style it correctly. And you can see I've brushed it out just to make sure it's all ready to go and all neat. Now's the part where I separate each section of hair. I get reference images as you can see on the side, and I'd really recommend trying to get different angles at the character you're trying to do. While sectioning out into the areas you want to go together, I'd try and work with the wig, so you'll find there are layers in the wig. Some bits of hair will be longer than others. Try and get all the same bits of hair the same length to work together. This will be doing layers, so usually at the top you might have shorter, depending on your wig, and working down. If there is a piece of hair that isn't flowing the way you want it naturally, now's a good time to try and reform the fibre. So this is where you'd want to get a steamer, hold the hair in the angle you want it to come off at naturally, and use a steamer and steam it, and then the fibres will heat up and dry and form in the area you want it, so it will more naturally flow that way and won't look so jarring. If at this point you realise there are some bits that are too long, I wouldn't recommend cutting it now. I'd do that later after the crimping, because when you style, your wig could get shorter. And when sectioning out, I'd make sure to leave parts that come down beside your ear, so you're able to easily frame it to your face a bit easier to make it look more naturally sitting on you. When doing your fringe, please try to think about where your eyes are, because you do not want a wig that covers your eyes the whole day of con, unless it's canon. I would say it's worth more time working on how you're sectioning out the front of your fringe, because that is what everyone will see, and so I'll do it to a bit more smaller spikes to get the detail. So now it's all sectioned, I do crimp it. This is how I do my wigs. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I do just find the crimping makes it a lot easier to style, and it kind of gives it that cloudy animated effect. So when I crimp, I go over a strand of hair several times. This really helps to reduce the crimping marks. But before I go into detail a bit more about how I crimp, I'm going to show you the before and after so you can kind of see the effect it makes and how it's easier for styling. Here you can see a bit that hasn't been crimped, but if you look over here, this bit and the bit next to it has been crimped. If you can see, it kind of stands up a little bit easier. I also find once I do spray the styling spray on, it stays in that position a lot better than other wigs would keep styled. Now it's just a case of going around the whole wig and crimping. As you can see here, I crimp and brush out and crimp and brush out. You may also notice that I have two crimpers. The reason for that is I have a smaller one that I originally got cheaper, and that's easier to get into the wig when I need to crimp right near the edge, whereas the bigger one is a lot quicker. And if you're doing longer wigs, you definitely want the bigger one, as I have done Raiden's wig from Genshin Impact with this smaller one, and my hand hurt for days afterwards. And as you can see here, the more and more I go over it, the less you can see the crimp marks. I will also say though, if your wig isn't the best quality, just be careful of heat damage. Always best to test. Now you can see half the hair is done, and he looks like he has bananas coming out of his hair. That's why I love doing it with blonde wigs. So I continued off camera and got the whole wig done. As you can see here, you can still see crimp lines. And another way to help get rid of this, if you've been over and over it, is to straighten just the top layer. The reason I say just the top layer is if you straightened it all, you would kind of lose the crimping effect that you've probably taken time to do. Once you're happy with it all, now's time for the actual styling. This is the point where it's critical to refer back to your reference images, and if your strands aren't where they want to be, now is the time to change them. So first of all, see what way the direction of the spike is going. If it's not going in the direction you want to reform the fibres. You can do this by using a steamer, as you can see here. Next, you'll want to hold it in place as you want it and spray some Got2b hairspray on it. Then you can dry it with a hairdryer, holding it in the shape you want, and repeat this process a few times till there's enough Got2b hairspray. Remember when spraying to spray about a foot away where possible. So this will mean you won't get super shiny, visible hairspray on your wig. I've also learned when styling, it's best to try and go from the top down or the top then down on one side, as you can see here, because when you're spraying, it affects everything underneath. Once I was happy with this spike, I then moved on to the next part of the wig. And this process repeated on and over until I'd essentially done all of his wig. Due to some of the wig being different lengths, because I've got it from different layers, you can see I cut some of it off. You have to be very careful whilst doing this and only do it if you're confident. Here you can see how the layers start to look. One thing you can do, as you can see I'm spraying it here, it doesn't go into a perfect spike to start with. I do go over and over and then cut it, but there is a product called Got2b Glued that can really help stick the ends. But I do find after a few restyles and a few attempts, the wig gets worse and worse quality afterwards, so you just have to be careful if that's something you want to use, but it can definitely help bring the spikes to a point. Another tip that you can see here is that I'm using a comb with kind of a pointed end. This can be really handy to help just pick up loose bits of hairs without getting loads of hairspray in your hands or them sticking to your hands. So where possible, I'd really advise getting one. While styling, it is ideal not to crimp or straighten your wig. The reason for this is when you already have hairspray on something, if you're then to crimp it, it kind of fries it because there's all that moisture on it, and it can make the wig go really weird and it can be a different texture to the rest of the wig. So that's why I tried to crimp everything beforehand, section it all out, then spray the hairspray on afterwards. Another tip that I've learned when wig styling is that it looks a lot better if a wig fits your face rather than just sits on top. So to help this, you want to make the side bits that come down here, usually around your ears and temples, to try and curve into your face and sit closer rather than far away. This can be done by making it slightly curve inwards, or by styling it using a pin and pinning it to the wig so it dries a bit closer to the head. Sometimes people find this is easier to do whilst it is on their head. I've always struggled to do so, and that's more when you're doing natural curves. I know a good friend of mine, little shout out to Bahat on Instagram, that he uses glue to stick it to the side of his face. You can get spirit gum, which I've used before, and it just helps make the wig stay closer to your face. Now you may find for some parts of the wig you'll need to cut it, but please crimp before you cut, because crimping may reduce the length of your wig anyway. So do that first and then cut. As you can see here, I'm using thinning scissors right near the edge. It will help it if you want that kind of spike effect because it will thin the edge more. So cut and cut more and more closer to the edge, and then brush it out before doing it again until it's the required thinness and size you need. You may find you need to thin quite a few of the strands at the front because of the fringe. It can stick up quite easily on top of each other and get in the way of your eyes, so it's a bit better to make the fringe a bit thinner so it's easier to wear, easier to see, and so it doesn't all bulk up and look silly. At this point you can kind of see how your wig may be coming together and what it kind of looks like. So when doing the back hair, you've really got to think, you know, does your character have windswept hair? Does it stick out a bit more? Where do you want them endpoint spikes to be? For example, my Dainsleif, the back of his hair basically just drops straight down, which especially with a crimp wig is slightly harder to do because you want to make sure it doesn't stick out too much. But with Gepard, he's kind of got flicks, so I make sure some of the points flick and the rest just slowly kind of angle towards the back, giving it a slightly swept back look. I noticed especially at the back of his hair, he doesn't have much hair kind of spiking out, so that's why my spikes and curls kind of go a bit straighter. But as I say, you've got to look at the character wig, try and get a 3D model so you can see every angle at him, and then go from there. Because this is really where your wig can look like your character and not any other blonde character for this example. Now, you may have been clever and pointed out that I have contradicted myself in this video. As you can see, I have been using the hair straighter during parts of this when I said not to, especially after you started spraying. I have been very careful about this and being careful where I'm spraying. But the reason why I do this is because where you can see with the black ties, I've pulled it in. When you release them, especially after it was heated the first time, you may realise that this has kind of deformed the hair, and the hair has like a section where it's just tugged in. To help undo this, I very gently, on a low heat, spray the hair out to give it its original form back. And then I will go and shape it into the shape I want it. And slowly but surely we're getting there. Woo! Now is the time to go over all the wig and help secure in place. So you can see the product here, which I briefly talked about earlier, is Got2b Glued. This can be really, really good, and you don't need much, as you can see from my fingertip, for help keeping the spikes in a point. But as warned earlier, if you use this, I do find those sections of the wigs dry up a lot quicker, and they can cause them to very slightly change colour, but it will mean if there's wind, the spikes will keep a lot stronger and for longer, and it will just help the wig keep looking neat. I will add at this point, this is a point you may want to cut any loose bits that are coming off. You may find when you crimp there's a lot of looser, messier bits near the top. Feel free just to cut them off. As you've crimped it, your wig should be fuller of volume, so hopefully it will all be good. I will say, as you can see here with the Got2b hair glue, I don't dry it with a hairdryer, I just put it in and leave it overnight, and you'll find the next morning that those bits you put it on are pretty solid. Then after a day at AnimeCon and standing in the wind, you can see my wig shape held in place. With that, I hope this wig tutorial helped you, and please like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube for more.